Chapter 10. The Photograph and the Journal. Nikki walked back to Greenhaven, thoughts zooming around in her mind like bees. So much had happened in just 2 days. She felt a little dizzy with it all. She would read for a while, she decided, to get calmed down. Her plan for that afternoon was to go through the look at later pile. She went into the kitchen to make herself a cup of hot chocolate, and it occurred to her all at once that hot chocolate was the perfect thing to give up. It was something she really liked, so it would be hard to give up, and doing something hard would strengthen her goodness, just the way exercise strengthened muscles. So she made a cup of mint tea instead, and carried it up to the nursery, where she took her look at later pile from the toy cabinet and set it on the window seat. The light was dim there because of the blankets she and Amanda had hung over the windows, and because of the cloudy sky. She pushed one of the blankets aside a little and settled down with a big red pillow at her back. Otis jumped up next to her. The first thing she wanted to check was the envelope she'd begun to look at yesterday. She picked it up and slid out the photograph. It was brownish and had a cardboard backing. It showed 6 people. 2 men and 2 women, seated, and 2 children sitting on the floor in front of them. They wore old-fashioned outfits and had sour looks on their faces, as if they were annoyed with the photographer for making them sit still so long. There was something odd about the 2 men, who sat next to each other in the center of the group. At first Nikki thought one of them was sitting in the other one's lap. She looked closer. The 2 men, who looked just alike, seemed to be stuck together. Yes, they were joined by what looked like a thick finger of flesh that went from the stomach of one to the stomach of the other. That was why they were sitting in that odd way. They were twins, connected twins, or something like that. There was another word for it that she couldn't remember. Under the picture, someone had written, "The Messrs. Bunker and their wives, visitors to Greenhaven on June 4, 1868. Visitors to Greenhaven! They must have been here, in this house. She gazed at the picture a long time. How would it be to live your life attached to someone else? You could never get away from each other, not to go for a walk, not in bed at night, not even in the bathroom. If one was sick, the other would have to lie there too. If one wanted to go downtown and the other wanted to stay home and read the newspaper, they'd have to negotiate about it and try to agree. Each one would always hear everything the other said. It was the strangest kind of life she could imagine. She put the picture back in its envelope and took up the small brown notebook that Amanda had brought to her, the one her great-grandfather had written in. She read the first entry again, where he'd said he'd been having odd experiences, and then she read on. 12:10. It's the second-floor bedroom, I think. The one at the west end of the hall. Why there? Some memory being triggered? Can't figure it out. 12:13. Darn hip giving me trouble. Stayed in bed most of the day. 12:19. Althea T. still not speaking much after nearly 6 months. Brenda B. very worried about her. He was writing about the prophet. But then the next entry was about something quite different. 12:27. Could past, present, and future all exist at the same time, and certain people slip around between them? See theories set forth in recent sci journals. Ask M. What was that about? A movement on the sidewalk below caught her attention. She looked out the window. There was Mrs. Beeson, wearing a rain jacket with the hood up over her baseball cap, walking a long-bodied, short-legged dog on a leash. That must be Sausage, Nikki thought. She watched as Mrs. Beeson passed, walked on, and turned in at a house across the street. It was a brick house, old but well cared for, with a straight path that led to a white front door with a tall, narrow window on each side. 2 bushes flanked the door, both of them trimmed into neat round shapes like green beach balls. It was a perfect-looking house, Nikki thought, just right for Mrs. Beeson, who was aiming to get rid of all the wrongness in Yonwood. If only the whole world could be that way. She watched until Mrs. Beeson and Sausage had disappeared into the house. Then she lay back on the big red pillow to think for a while, and the next thing she knew, it was twilight outside, and Crystal's voice was calling from downstairs. She leapt up and rushed out of the room, not forgetting to cram the rags under the door, and she sped downstairs before Crystal could come up looking for her. "What a day!" Crystal said. She hung her coat on the coat rack that stood in the hall. "I've been all over the place. What have you been doing? Just reading?" "Mostly," said Nicky. "Found anything interesting?" "Lots," Nicky said. "This house is just full of interesting stuff. I don't see how you can stand to sell it." Crystal just shrugged. "Interesting stuff like what?" she said. "I found a really strange old photograph, for one thing. Wait a second and I'll show you." She dashed upstairs again. Otis trotted over to her when she went in. Feeling sorry that he'd be alone from now till morning, she knelt down and patted him for a while. She rumpled his ears, and, when he rolled over, scratched his stomach. Then she took the picture of the twins from its envelope and hurried back downstairs, where she found Crystal talking on the phone. "Try not to worry," Crystal said. "I'm sure he's fine." Okay. Bye." She hung up. "That was your mother," she said. Nicky cried, "But I wanted to talk to her." "She was exhausted," said Crystal. "Too tired to talk. She just wanted to let us know that she's had another postcard from your father. I wrote it down for you." She handed Nicky a scrap of paper. Nicky read, "Dear Rachel and Nicky, we are working hard here on a big project. I am well, and I hope both of you are too. I miss you. Love, Dad. P.S. Sure would like to have one of Rachel's peanut butter cookies right now." Again, not much news, but also again a puzzling P.S. She couldn't remember her mother ever making peanut butter cookies. What was going on in her father's mind? Crystal had gone into the kitchen, and Nicky followed her. "Here's the picture," she said, putting it on the table. "Oh, yes," Crystal said. "I remember hearing about this. These men are Chan and Eng, who came from Siam. That's what we now call Thailand. They were the original Siamese twins. They came to the United States and traveled around being exhibited for years, and then they retired to North Carolina, not far from here. Grandfather told me they'd visited this house once. It was at the time of his great-grandfather, sometime after the Civil War. They must have given this photo to the family as a sort of thank-you gift." She turned the photograph over. "Look at this!" she exclaimed. "They've written on the back." Nicky peered at the old-fashioned handwriting. It said, "With gratitude for your hospitality," and was signed with 2 names. "If this is authentic," said Crystal, "it could be worth something." "How much?" said Nicky. "I have no idea. Not a great deal, probably, but something." Nicky took the photo and turned it over again. "I guess those 2 boys are their children," she said. "Yes," said Crystal. "In fact, I think they had something like 10 children apiece." "Wouldn't it be hard to be married to Siamese twins?" said Nicky, looking at the grumpy faces of the 2 big women. "I surely think so," said Crystal. "In fact, as I recall, the 2 women were sisters, but they didn't get along. After a while, the twins got themselves 2 houses, one for each wife, and the husbands alternated between them." She shook her head. "Amazing, isn't it, that they managed to work things out at all? I tried twice, under much easier circumstances, and failed both times." She opened up a cupboard and took down a can of soup. "Can you bear to have soup again for dinner?" she said. "I'm too tired to do anything else." "That's okay," said Nicky. She wondered if she should tell Crystal about the prophet, and Mrs. Beeson, and how Yonwood was battling the forces of evil by building a shield of goodness. But she hesitated. Crystal might decide that Nicky shouldn't be getting involved in that battle. She might decide that Nicky needed more supervision. Nicky didn't want that at all. So all she said was, "Crystal, do you think there's going to be a war?" "I don't know," Crystal said. "Fortunately, I'm too busy to think much about it." She cast a quick look at Nicky. "Don't you think about it either," she said. "There's not much we can do." "Just live good lives, right?" Nicky said. "Not add to the badness. That's what you said before." "Uh-huh," said Crystal. She opened up the can and scooped the soup into a pot. "So if everyone lives good lives, then maybe bad things won't happen," Nicky said. "At least not to us." But she could tell Crystal wasn't really listening. She was holding the soup can under the faucet to fill it, but only a feeble trickle of water was coming out. "Something is wrong with the water pressure," she said. "We must have a leaky pipe somewhere. And the plumbers are just here. They've made it worse instead of better. And of course tomorrow is Sunday, so a plumber will be hard to find." She sighed. "There's so much to do. I suppose I should face the 3rd floor. I haven't even been up there." Nicky's heart jumped into her throat. "It's just rooms full of boxes," she said. "You don't need to see it." "No, I really should." Crystal stirred the soup with one hand and ran the other hand wearily through her hair. "I need to see what I have to deal with. Not tonight, though. I'll do it first thing tomorrow morning." Crystal reached for 2 bowls. "It's getting dark," she said. "Would you switch the light on?" That was when Nicky remembered. "We have to close all the curtains and blinds," she said. "We do? Why?" "So we can't be seen from the air," said Nicky. "In case there's an attack." She pulled down the kitchen blinds. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary," Crystal said. "But if it makes you feel better, go ahead." Nicky went from room to room, closing curtains and blinds all over the house.